Carmen Rodriguez sat in the sterile waiting room of St. Mary's Hospital, her hands tightly clasped. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and every tick of the clock sent her heart racing. Each passing second reminded her how fragile Brandon's life had become. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" Dr. Patricia Hayes approached, her expression careful but firm. "We need to talk about Brandon's condition." Carmen's tightened. "Is it bad?" "His kidneys are failing rapidly," Dr. Hayes said gently. "Without a transplant, he may have only 6 months. We've placed him on the donor list, but waiting for a deceased donor could take years." Carmen's stomach twisted. Years? He doesn't have years. "There is another option," Dr. Hayes continued. "A living donor transplant could save him, and it could happen much sooner. You'd need to be fully evaluated to ensure you're healthy enough to donate a kidney. Only if you're a compatible match would this be possible, and the surgery carries real risks for you." Carmen didn't hesitate. "Test me. If I'm a match, I'll do it." Over the next week, Carmen underwent a battery of tests: blood work, imaging, heart and lung evaluations. Each result came back in her favor. She was healthy enough to survive the surgery, and preliminary compatibility testing suggested she could donate successfully. The day before surgery, Victoria sat by her hospital bed, hand lightly resting over Carmen's. "You're braver than anyone I know," she said softly. Her dark hair fell across one eye, catching a hint of something Carmen didn't notice at first, a calculating intensity beneath the smile. "I love him," Carmen said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her chest. "I have to do this." The surgery lasted 4 hours. Carmen awoke groggy and sore in a monitored recovery ward. Nurses checked her vitals and incision site frequently. Her body ached, and the anesthesia fog made every thought feel heavier. Brandon was allowed brief visits, only a few minutes at a time, since he too needed rest. His body was weak from the chronic kidney disease, medications, and the stress of surgery, and nurses monitored him closely. Brandon whispered gratitude from the edge of her bed. "You've saved my life, Carmen. I can't thank you enough." "You don't have to," she murmured. "That's what love is, helping each other when it matters most." Even after discharge, both had strict recovery schedules. Carmen's body had to heal from a major surgery: limited lifting, careful walking exercises, wound care, and regular checkups. Brandon's post-transplant recovery required strict medication adherence, routine lab work, and avoidance of any infection risk. They were never fully alone with each other for long periods, but every short conversation, every glance carried weight. Victoria helped subtly, bringing groceries, assisting with minor tasks, offering small comforts. Carmen noticed the way her sister's eyes sometimes lingered, too intent, as if measuring something. A faint unease crept in, gnawing at her. Was it just her exhaustion and pain, or something else? Something darker? Late at night, Carmen lay in bed, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. She thought about Brandon's fragile body, about the kidney she had given him, and about the subtle glances between him and Victoria. Her heart ached not just from physical pain, but from an instinct she couldn't name. A suspicion that her sacrifice might not be enough, that something had shifted in ways she couldn't yet see. When Carmen returned home, the house felt both familiar and foreign. Every corner reminded her of the life they had built, and every quiet moment seemed to echo with absence. Her body was weak, her incision tender, but the surgeons had assured her that gradual walking and light activity would help her recover fully. She was cautious, but determined. Brandon, too, was recovering at home, monitored closely by his transplant team. He adhered strictly to his regimen: immunosuppressant medications at precise intervals, careful attention to diet, avoiding public places to prevent infection, and frequent blood tests to monitor kidney function. He moved slowly, fatigued by even short walks, and often napped during the day. Nurses visited occasionally to check vitals and ensure both were following instructions. Carmen noticed a subtle distance in him. He would smile and thank her, but his eyes sometimes seemed elsewhere, distracted. She tried to rationalize it. Perhaps the transplant had taken a heavier toll than anyone expected, or maybe he was simply exhausted from months of illness. Victoria, meanwhile, was always helping. She brought meals, cleaned, and made small gestures of support, but Carmen began to notice things that didn't quite add up. The way Victoria lingered longer than necessary, the The faint tension when Brandon and Carmen were alone, the sharp glances that flickered just a little too quickly toward her. One evening, Carmen attempted light physical therapy exercises in the living room. Brandon sat nearby, sipping water, quiet. Victoria hovered awkwardly, pretending to adjust a cushion. Carmen's heart thumped in a rhythm that had nothing to do with exertion. Something was off. "Everything okay?" Victoria asked, voice too sweet. "Yes," Carmen said, forcing herself to continue stretching. Her gaze flicked toward Brandon. He was watching her, nodding with polite concern, but there was a subtle tension in his jaw, a hesitation in his smile. Later that night, Carmen lay awake, listening to the house breathe. Brandon's faint snore came from the guest room. He had not yet fully regained strength and slept in a quieter area to avoid disturbing her. The silence was deceptive. In the quiet, Carmen's mind sharpened, examining every detail, every glance, every word exchanged over the past months. Her thoughts returned obsessively to the surgery, the kidney she had given him, the risks she had endured, and the sacrifices she had made. The gratitude in Brandon's eyes had felt warm, real, but lately it seemed tinged with something else. Distance, hesitation, a subtle shift she couldn't ignore. Carmen's eyes drifted to Victoria, asleep on the couch after tidying up the dishes. She noted the careful way her sister's hair fell over her shoulder, the faint smile as if she were thinking about something private. A prickling unease climbed her spine. Her body was healing, but her mind churned. What if her sacrifice had not mattered? What if the person she had saved, the man she had trusted most, was already turning away from her? What if the sister she had loved was no longer the one she thought she knew? The questions formed a dark spiral in her mind, each one sharper than the last. Sleep came reluctantly, interrupted by fleeting images of subtle betrayals, hushed conversations, and secretive smiles. Her heart raced even in dreams, and as the night deepened, Carmen realized she could no longer trust what she saw or what she felt or even what she believed she knew. Something unseen was shifting, something dark was approaching. Her body rested, but her mind did not. And somewhere deep inside, a seed of suspicion, cold, sharp, insistent, had been planted. By the time Carmen was cleared for full activity, her body had healed enough to manage daily routines and fatigue was fading. Brandon, too, was stable. His transplanted kidney was functioning well, and he had returned to light work under strict medical supervision. Follow-up visits and blood tests kept him on track. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Victoria still visited frequently, helping with groceries, laundry, and errands, her presence a comfort during Carmen's recovery. But now subtle memories began surfacing, flashes of moments from months earlier, before the surgery, that Carmen had rationalized as stress or coincidence. Brandon taking calls privately, lingering touches from Victoria, hidden glances, all signs she had ignored while lying in the hospital bed, focused on her own pain and recovery. Now, months later, with her strength returning, the inconsistencies became impossible to dismiss. Then came the credit card statement. Dinners at Romano's, purchases at Victoria's Secret, hotel charges for nights flaing. Brandon claimed to be working late. Carmen's hands shook as she scrolled through months of unexplained transactions. The whisper of betrayal grew into a roar she could no longer ignore. That evening, she confronted him. "Brandon, can you explain this?" she asked, holding the statement like a weapon. His face went pale. "Carmen, I can explain." "Explain $300 at a lingerie store, hotel charges, dinners I wasn't invited to. How do you explain that?" "It's not what it looks like," he muttered. "Not what it looks like. From where I'm sitting, my husband, the man whose life I saved, is having an affair." Brandon ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she once found comforting. Now it was guilty, hollow. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Carmen's chest tightened. "So there is someone else. Who is she?" The silence stretched, suffocating. Victoria. The room spun. Her sister, the woman who had cared for her while she recovered, who had smiled at her vulnerability, had been lying. All this time. "It just happened," Brandon whispered. "During your recovery, we got close." Carmen laughed bitterly. "Close? While I was giving you a part of my body to save your life? Don't make this only about the kidney," he pleaded. "Everything is about the kidney," she snapped. "I risked my life for you, and this is your thanks." Brandon's phone buzzed, Victoria's name a heart emoji. The evidence she feared was now undeniable. 2 months. 2 months of secret meetings, of stolen smiles, of her husband and sister scheming behind her back even before the transplant surgery. Carmen's chest ached, her mind scrambling, trying to reconcile months of caregiving with months of deception. She wanted him out, tonight. Brandon packed silently, avoiding her gaze. Carmen sat on their bed, the place where dreams of a shared future had once flourished, feeling something cold harden inside her. "I never meant to hurt you," Brandon said softly. "But you did," she replied, steady despite the tremor in her hands. She called Victoria. The phone rang 4 times before her sister answered. "Carmen? It's late." "I know about you and Brandon," Carmen said, each word sharp, deliberate. The silence stretched. "I can explain," Victoria whispered. Just don't," Carmen hissed. "You destroyed my life while I was vulnerable, while I was recovering. That's all you needed to do. You never understand." "I love him," Victoria said, trembling. The words shattered Carmen. Rage, grief, disbelief collided in her chest. She hung up and threw her phone against the wall. Fragments skittered across the room like echoes of betrayal. Alone, the house was suffocating. Wedding photos stared from the mantelpiece. Brandon's coffee mug sat abandoned. Her scar throbbed, a cruel reminder of her sacrifice. Carmen approached the mirror. The reflection was hollow, older, hardened by deceit. She had saved a life, yet she had been abandoned by those she trusted most. Her lips curved into a small, cold smile, not joy but acknowledgement. "Some people," she whispered, voice barely audible, "just get what they deserve." That night sleep eluded her. Her mind raced, retracing every gesture, every secret call, every hidden glance she had ignored. Rage coiled in her chest. Curiosity sharpened into obsession. She realized justice might not come on its own. A plan, dark but necessary in her mind, began to form. Thoughts once unthinkable now seemed almost reasonable. By dawn, the house was silent except for her quiet breathing. The seed of something dangerous had been planted. A growing fixation, a hunger for balance only she could enforce. Deep inside, Carmen knew nothing would ever be the same again. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Brandon and Victoria, the divorce papers arrived. Carmen spread them across the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she traced the typed words. Brandon demanded half the house, half the savings, even her modest teaching pension. Every line of the legal language felt like a cold, precise blade slicing through her chest. Her phone rang constantly. Friends and colleagues offered polite condolences. Family sent texts of concern. She let them ring. Sympathy didn't matter. Not now. Carmen picked up the papers again, reading the fine print. Property division, asset allocation, the house she had decorated, the savings she had painstakingly built, the retirement she'd worked toward for decades. Brandon had ensured every detail favoured him. Every word reaffirmed her life had been dismantled by 2 people she had trusted. She poured herself a glass of wine, staring out the window at the quiet street. Her scar throbbed faintly, a dull, constant reminder of the kidney she had donated. A part of her had been given away, only to watch the man she loved walk into another's arms, hand in hand with her own sister. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalised, Carmen went for her follow-up checkup. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the same physician who had guided her through the transplant, offered a measured smile. "Carmen," Dr. Hayes said gently, "I know the surgery went well physically, but emotionally, I can see how difficult the aftermath has been. Brandon leaving you, Victoria, divorce papers. I'm sorry. You didn't just donate a kidney, you gave someone your life, and they repaid you with betrayal." Carmen nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you, doctor. It helps, hearing that from someone who understands the weight of what I went through." "I know you're strong," Dr. Hayes continued, "but don't forget to take care of yourself. This isn't just physical recovery, it's emotional. You need time." Carmen smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I've had time," she said, almost to herself, but inside a new awareness was forming. Pain had shifted into something sharper. Focus, calculation, resolve. The first year after the divorce was hard. Carmen moved into a smaller apartment, kept her teaching job, and quietly rebuilt her life. Outwardly, she was polite, composed, almost serene. But every moment alone, every quiet night, her mind replayed Brandon and Victoria together. The laughter, the stolen glances, the unearned happiness. The betrayal had embedded itself deep within her psyche. By the end of the first year, Carmen realized that grief alone wasn't enough. Rage had settled into her bones, and it demanded attention. She started researching legal means to observe the couple, hiring a private investigator who could track their publicly available routines, dinner spots, weekend habits, even the occasional social media post. Everything was done within the law. No illegal surveillance, just careful, methodical observation. At night, she reviewed the photos and reports, Brandon and Victoria laughing, holding hands, making plans. She noted the little patterns: Tuesday dinners at Romano's, Friday movie nights, weekend brunches at the downtown cafe. Each predictable habit became a piece of a puzzle, something she could map and understand. She also scheduled her own medical checkups, just as Dr. Hayes had advised, ensuring that she remained strong, healthy, capable. Every visit reminded her of the life she had nearly given away completely, the organ she had donated and the man who had taken it for granted. The physical scars were healing, but the emotional ones were far from over. 2 years later, Carmen's outward life was stable. Her apartment was modest but orderly. She taught her classes, graded papers, and attended social events occasionally. On the surface, she was the composed, polite teacher who had survived tragedy. No one would have guessed that beneath her calm exterior, her mind was meticulously planning the redress of a past injustice. The scar on her side had faded, but the memory remained vivid. She could trace every detail of the surgery: the sterile room, the smell of antiseptic, the sharp beeping of the heart monitor. That kidney had given Brandon life that he used to betray her with her sister. And Victoria had smiled while doing it. That memory alone could ignite a slow, searing fury. Carmen kept a private binder now, a collection of photographs from the investigator, notes on routines, public events, and every piece of information she could gather legally. She wasn't spying, she was documenting. She was patient. The obsession had grown steadily, like a vine wrapping around her life. Sometimes she would sit by her window at night, glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights flicker. Brandon and Victoria were living their lives, oblivious to her presence, unaware that their past was being scrutinized with painstaking detail. The thought gave her a cold, quiet thrill. Her PI had suggested occasional updates via phone, sending new photos and patterns monthly. Carmen studied them intensely, noting every deviation from routine. Brandon had a habit of lingering longer than usual at Romano's on Thursday nights. Victoria preferred taking the back streets when driving home. Small details, but they mattered. Carmen scheduled her own medical checkups every 6 months. Dr. Hayes would comment on how healthy she looked, how strong her body had remained despite the surgery and the stress. Each visit reminded her she was capable, resilient, prepared. The organ she had given was gone, but she herself was intact, a silent force gathering strength. The psychological strain of her obsession was real. At times, she would replay conversations from years ago, dissecting every word, tone, and inflection. She questioned herself constantly. Was it revenge she wanted? Closure? Or something darker? A need to assert control over the chaos they had caused? Every morning she went through the routines of a normal life. Teaching, errands, social niceties. But each night the mind wandered back to Brandon and Victoria. Planning, imagining, connecting dots. She would make lists, draw maps, analyze social media, public sightings, even restaurant receipts when she could legally obtain them through the PI. And always the quiet, simmering thought, one day they would pay. She could almost feel the anticipation like a heartbeat beneath her ribs. It was methodical, patient, deliberate. Carmen wasn't just angry, she was calculating. Her emotions were sharp but controlled. She had learned to wait, to watch, to prepare. Tonight she set down her wineglass and looked out the window, tracing the city streets in her mind. The lights flickered on Romano's. Somewhere in that glow they were alive and careless. A low, satisfied smile curved her lips, not cruel, not triumphant, but cold, precise. She had waited, she had planned, and one day soon everything would change. 2 years had passed since the divorce. 2 years of hollow smiles in the classroom, polite nods to neighbours, and lonely dinners reheated in the microwave. Carmen Rodriguez had survived, but survival was not living. Each day reminded her of what she had lost. A husband she had saved with her kidney, a sister who had stolen him, and the life that had been quietly dismantled while she healed. The divorce settlement had bled her dry. Brandon had walked away with half of everything: their house, their savings, even part of her pension. Victoria had slipped into the role Carmen once played: wife, partner, homemaker. They married barely a year after the divorce, their union celebrated by friends and distant relatives as if it were a fairy tale, rather than the betrayal Carmen had endured. For months, Carmen carried a quiet storm inside her. The bitterness simmered, a sharp reminder of the injustice she had suffered. She had saved a life, only to watch it be used as a stepping stone into another woman's arms. The evidence collected over the years, the photographs, notes, and reports from her private investigator, sat neatly in a binder on her desk, a constant temptation to dwell in resentment. Yet life, as it often does, nudged her in unexpected directions. A longtime friend, hearing about her ordeal, reached out. At first, Carmen rebuffed the messages, brushed off the calls, and ignored the texts. She didn't want pity, advice, or reminders that life could go on. She wanted nothing to do with anyone who would force her to relive the past. But her friend persisted, gentle yet unwavering, offering small ways to brighten her day, sharing a funny anecdote from school, suggesting a quiet walk in the park, inviting her for coffee. Slowly, the isolation that had gripped her began to loosen. Carmen noticed the little changes. Her heart didn't clench at every mention of Brandon's name. She laughed softly at a joke in a text. She responded to a call without resentment. Small openings, almost imperceptible, became the first steps to something she hadn't dared to feel in years: hope. Her friend suggested therapy, bluntly but kindly. Carmen scoffed at first. "I don't need someone to tell me what I already know," she said. But the seed had been planted. She started to consider it quietly, thinking of her own mental exhaustion, the restless nights, the obsessive thoughts, the lingering bitterness. What harm could it do? The first few sessions were awkward. Carmen barely spoke, offering polite, clipped answers to the therapist's probing questions. She described the physical recovery after donating her kidney, the betrayal of her husband and sister, the hollow victories of daily routines. She cried once, quietly, ashamed of the release. But slowly, through repetition and patient guidance, the therapist helped her untangle the knot of resentment. She began keeping a journal, not as a weapon or record of grievances, but as a mirror of her own feelings. She wrote about small victories, grading papers without distraction, helping a student succeed, or simply enjoying a sunny afternoon. These small successes reminded her that life could be meaningful even outside of betrayal. Through therapy, Carmen was also introduced to a Christian community by her friend. Initially, she resisted. Faith had never been her refuge, yet the warmth, acceptance, and routine of church life offered something she hadn't realized she was missing. Sunday mornings became quiet hours of reflection, evening prayer groups offered companionship, and occasional volunteer work brought purpose. Slowly, she let go of the grip that anger had on her life. The bitterness lingered, but it no longer dictated her every thought. She could observe it without letting it consume her. Meanwhile, her daily life began to flourish in quiet ways. She painted her apartment in soft colours, planted flowers on the balcony, and took long walks in the park without thinking of Brandon or Victoria. Students noticed her subtle glow, colleagues remarked on her calm energy, and neighbours smiled when she passed by. Carmen didn't announce her healing. It was evident in small gestures, in the way she held herself, in the steadiness of her voice. The binder of collected evidence remained for a while, a silent reminder of years spent in quiet obsession. But one evening, as she sipped tea and watched the city lights flicker on, Carmen realized she no longer needed it. With deliberate care, she destroyed every photograph, shredded every note, and watched as the memories of tracking Brandon and Victoria turned to ash. She called her PI, letting him know that the investigation had ended. No more tracking, no more reminders of the past. She was free. Months passed and Carmen's life became a rhythm of normalcy and peace. Therapy sessions evolved into reflections on gratitude and growth. Church connections became meaningful friendships. She celebrated milestones, both personal and spiritual, with quiet pride. The wound in her heart that had festered for years finally began to close, replaced by something steadier: resilience. And yet, life has a way of surprising even the most careful plans. Weeks later, Carmen received word through a mutual acquaintance that Brandon's health had taken a sudden turn for the worse. Complications related to his previous kidney transplant, perhaps a combination of infection risk, medication strain, and a hereditary predisposition, had led to another organ failure. He was now bedridden, entirely dependent on medical care, facing the same vulnerability he once had. Carmen felt a complex tangle of emotions. Relief? Possibly. A quiet acknowledgement that life had its way of balancing itself? Perhaps. But there was no gloating, no joy in vengeance. She simply allowed the news to wash over her with calm detachment. She had survived, healed, and reclaimed her life. That was all that mattered. She sat by her window that evening, watching the city lights blink on one by one, reflecting on 2 years of pain, recovery, and growth. The memories of betrayal remained, but they no longer bound her. They were reminders of her resilience, of her capacity to endure and rebuild. Her phone buzzed gently with a message from her friend. "Dinner tomorrow? You deserve it." Carmen smiled, a full, relaxed smile this time, and typed back a quick reply. She had survived more than she could have imagined, and she was finally ready to live, not just exist. In the quiet of her apartment, she reflected on the irony. Life had returned Brandon to vulnerability, but she did not feel triumph. She felt peace. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And drop a comment with the location you're watching from. I'd love to see how far our stories are reaching across the world.